Oh, the 1990s. If you came up in the 1990s, you remember that nostalgia. Just thinking about the 90s put you back in childhood if you was ever born in the 80s. Now, I was born in 85, so around 1995 I was 10. So I have that 90s nostalgia. They had good shows, even good commercials, and great cartoons. But some of the cartoons pretty much disappeared and it's not even mentioned anymore because of years gone by. But I want to talk about three of the most forgotten cartoons of the 90s. And number one is Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing holds the dubious record of having the least number of episodes on this list, with only 5. However, even with such a small number of episodes, the series wasn't a complete failure, as the show was syndicated for years after its initial run, spawning a moderately successful line of toys. Swamp Thing is actually closely related to Toxic Crusaders in a way it portrayed a horror premise in an over-the-top campy kind of way. Now, the first thing that stands out when people watch Swamp Thing is the opening theme song. I mean, it was a blatant ripoff of the classic Wild Things by Chip Taylor. The theme song just feels odd in the context of the rest of the show. The series was loosely based on a comic following Dr. Alec Holland, who is transformed into Swamp Thing after an altercation with Anton Arcane. Now, as Swamp Thing, he uses his powers to help protect the swamp from pollution-based monster villains. Going on to number 2 is SWAT Cats, the Radical Sqaudron. You see, SWAT Cats could have been a huge success in the mid-90s after the second season finished airing in 1994. The show became the top-rated syndicated animated icon. The series featured 2 feline cat fighter pilots who used their advanced jet to defend Mega Cat City from the various villains, while also butting heads with Mega Cat City's own law enforcement. The show's early success spawned a toy line and a video game. However, it was canceled for no other reason than because it was deemed too violent. Unfortunately for SWAT Cats, the Radical Sqaudron, TBS owner Ted Turner had become aware of the show and decided he didn't like the violence. So he ordered it to be axed, along with all merchandise immediately. This left the production company with a handful of unfinished episodes. Not all was lost, however, because in 2015, the series creators launched a successful Kickstarter campaign, and now will attempt to produce a revival series to air on TV soon. And I remember SWAT Cats. In fact, I used to make sure I watched that as often as I could because that was a pretty good show. That was a pretty good cartoon show, and they was talking about how violent it is. It ain't that cartoon show wasn't any more violent than what the kids is watching now. Next on the list, coming in at number 3, is Toxic Crusaders. Our Toxic Crusaders featured the lovable Toxie, a hero that mutated by toxic waste, accompanied by his sentient mop that fought evil polluters from the planet Sqaudron. Toxie was joined by a variety of other heroes with similar toxic backgrounds, such as No Zone, Major Disaster, and Headbanger. The show was every bit as crazy as the premise sounds, featuring villains such as Zarzosta, Dr. Killermoth, and Psycho. The show was incredibly silly and embraced the campiness of the premise. Unfortunately, though, again, it failed to catch on and was sadly canceled after only 1 season. However, even though the show was short-lived, Toxic Crusaders action figures were released and are as epic as you would imagine. Now, all 3 of those shows, I got more too, but those was the top 3 shows, cartoon shows I miss. You know, SWAT Cats, Swamp Thing, and Toxic Crusaders. All 3 of those cartoons bring back 90s, pure 90s nostalgia. And if you didn't grow up in the 90s, then, you know, y'all had better cartoons than me if you was born back in the 70s, in the 60s, and 80s, you know. They just don't make things like they used to. So, I was your host, Priceless Raw, with another video, and thanks for watching.